Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Marianne Pinkston, and this is The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. And today I am so excited and honored to have a really special guest on. So we're in studio and not on Zoom, which is even better. But I have Col Eileen Collins, who was the first commander of the Space Shuttle, and she's retired from the U.S. Air Force, and she is here. We're going to promote her book, and then she's got a documentary that will be coming out late this year. And so I am, as I said, honored to have you here. Thank you for being in with me.
Thanks. It's great. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, of course. And so we met at a Women's Chamber event, and I just knew I had to have you on. And my long history of interest in space and flying and things like that. And so you are, you emulate somebody that I have always wanted to be. And so and I want to make sure that everybody, sees her book here. And I'm going to have a lot of this information on the website afterwards. But, today is usually a medical show, and I think we can drive things medically, but more human interest. And so I know you've got a lot of great things coming out. Tell us a little bit about you and how you came to this wonderful position.
Well, I think, first of all, it's the opportunities that are available here in this country.
Right.
And I was in the Air Force for 12 years or so before I went to NASA. I have traveled all around the world, and I've been to countries where, people live in poverty, and some of the things I've seen, having grown up in the United States, it was shocking for me to go to other countries and see how little they have, but how they're still getting along in their life. And I learned to really love this country and the opportunities that we have here. The fact that I was able as a woman to join the Air Force and become a pilot back in the days when women were first started, the Air Force first started putting women through pilot training. I was in one of those groups, one of the first. And I was very thankful for that because my dream was to fly. And as a kid, I read about the Gemini astronauts and the Apollo astronauts. And that's what I want to do.
Right.
They didn't have any women back in those days.
Right.
But I thought, I'm just going to be a lady astronaut. That's what I'm going to do.
Right.
Not realizing that women really were not, they either were not allowed in the program or they didn't have the proper background to be competitive to become an astronaut.
Correct.
Well, all of that changed in 1978 when I was in college. And I was lucky enough to come in at the right time.
Right.
So putting it all together, the opportunity being in the United States, the opportunity to join the military, which, by the way, paid for half of my college education for the next 2 years.
Correct.
So that was good. And then they paid me to fly airplanes.
Right.
That was my job.
Right.
And I loved it. And all the travel that I experienced and the people I worked with, the leadership opportunities, I'm a big proponent of the military.
Right.
Joining, even if you just join for 3 or 4 years, it really teaches you leadership and confidence. And people rely on you, and you realize that you're part of a team.
Right.
It's not just about me. It's how do I contribute to the team? And I think all of those really helped me develop. It helped me mentally develop into, I would say, the point where I felt like I was not only competitive, but I'm going to say good enough to be an astronaut.
Right. Which is absolutely amazing. You're right. There are lots of great doors that started to open. I watched my mom, go through a lot of battles in trying to open up her own business and do some of the things that she did. And so you are a part of a wonderful group of women that we owe a debt to, absolutely, to be able to do things that I do or whatnot. With the space program, though, I mean, it is. What a job, to get into the space program, to go into space. What is it like to go into space? I know we can talk about all the leadership roles and all the things that you do. The thing I want to know is, what's it like to get on that rocket?
Well, I like to talk about what it feels like, because I think space tourism is going to be hugely successful.
Yeah.
So right now it's too expensive. It's still very risky. Yeah. If you want a thrill, go to Six Flags or go to Disney or
go skydiving.
But the launch itself is a overwhelming experience. In fact, if I had not trained for my first launch, I would have been scared to death. It's really, it sounds like you're in a room that's burning, like a room on fire.
Right.
My first launch was at night. You got the reflection of the engines in the window. It's like a thunderstorm. There's so much shaking. I tell people, if you couldn't if you try to write something, it would be, you wouldn't be able to read it later because there's so much shaking going on in first stage when you're on the solid rocket boosters. And then I'd say the last thing about it is the amount of acceleration, how much you're being, I remember thinking I'm being hurled into space.
Oh, wow.
Hurled was the word that I would use. It's 3 Gs. And meaning a G is like a unit of gravity, but it's like a force. And here on Earth, we have 1 G.
Right.
In space, you have 0 Gs.
Right.
But to get there, you have to get to 3 Gs or more, depending on your launch vehicle. So let's say, for round numbers, let's say you weigh 100 pounds on Earth. And you could step on a weight scale, it would be 300 pounds.
Right.
That's how much force you have on you during the launch and the push that you're getting. So that's pretty overwhelming. We had trained for that, so I think I was mostly prepared. You want to be able to, if there's a malfunction or an emergency, you want to be able to think clearly, do the right actions, and then instantly you go to 0 gravity. 8.5 minutes after launch, everything starts floating.
Wow.
My checklist page is floated, tethers floated, the neck ring on my suit floated up around my nose, dust in the air. It was just very eerie. And I would compare it to possibly learning how to roller skate. You know how you're awkward when you learn skateboard, roller skate.
Sure.
You're very, at least for me, getting out of my seat, very awkward feeling, like hitting the wall. I kicked one of my crew members in the face. I still apologize to him all these years later. And you get a fluid shift where your face gets very fat, like the body fluids, the blood in your body equalizes. So on Earth, everything's pulled to the floor. Mm-hmm. Your face gets very fat, your hair floats, your legs get skinny, your wrinkles go away.
Well, that's
good. If you have wrinkles, they go away because your face just kind of puffs out. So that happens. I find myself and about half the astronauts get something called stomach awareness, where you don't want to eat anything because your stomach just, if I eat something, I think I'm going to lose it.
Yeah.
Because that's all floating too.
Right.
So I didn't eat anything for 4 days on my first flight. I just could not eat. I drank a lot. Yeah. Because if you don't drink a lot, you can end up with kidney stones.
Right.
Because of the way that you can get dehydrated up there. And then the second thing that happens is the disorientation. So because you don't have gravity telling you which way's up or which way's down. For example, let's say you're reading a checklist and you're just looking at the checklist and you might be rotating. That happened to me. I looked up and the ceiling was the floor. And that immediately makes your brain go into this weird, where am I mode. Right. And that can make you sick also. Like, where am I? Where is the floor? Where are the lockers? Right. You know, where are the switches? And it takes a while. So I learned not to have my head in the book for too long. Right. I've got to look up but I think that you get used to that in about 2 or 3 days.
But you're only up there for...
Well, in the shuttle program, we were up for 1 to 2 weeks. Okay. Nowadays, with the space station, the astronauts are up there more than 3 months. We started with 3 months. Now they do pretty much 6 months. Sometimes they do a year. Mm-hmm. We don't really plan for a year, but we sometimes, if they have a problem with their return, there was a problem last year with the Soyuz return vehicle, so the cosmonaut and the astronaut stayed up there for a year, waiting for their ride home. And we find that the human body can do that. We can adapt to that. It's not fun being gone that long because you want to come back. You want fresh air and sunshine. You want to eat pizza. You want to see, most of all, you want to see your family. Right. So it's hard to stay up there that long. But I'll tell you, 1 month to 3 months is the sweet spot. Right. And I haven't been up there that long, but from what I hear from my colleagues that have done the long duration flights, and I've talked to many of them, they say usually 3 months. Some people say 1 month is the best amount of time because you get adapted. You can get the full experience. Looking back at the Earth from space is incredible. I can't see, that is the second reason I think space tourism will be very successful. Sure. The first one is the 0G. Yeah. And, maybe the launch, but the 0G. And the second one is looking back at the Earth. We live on the outside of a sphere. Yes. We're tiny little dots on the outside of a ball. Yeah. And this thing called gravity is keeping us from floating away. Right. you see it from a whole different perspective. Now, all this stuff I learned in school, I remember my teachers telling me the earth was round, but I never actually saw it.
Right.
I took their word for it.
Yes.
But I can tell you right now, the earth is round. I am 100% positive because I've seen it. You can go around it once every 90 minutes in the space station, which is 17,500 miles an hour. If you project that flight path over the surface, that's how fast you're going.
That's incredible.
It's actually, when you come home, it's 25 times the speed of sound. You're smoking. You have to be very fast to maintain orbit. Otherwise, gravity would make you crash back down.
Absolutely.
So that's just a top. I could go on and on, but that's kind of the top.
I could listen to you all day. It's amazing. I really could. It's amazing. There's so many thoughts and questions. Like I say, I'd wanted to do this, and the launch I think would be my favorite part. I mean, it's such a thrill, right? Such an adrenaline rush, and I think flying is probably the same. I know you're a pilot as well. When you're on Earth, you fly as well. And so, tell me a little bit then about kind of if we are looking at space tourism in the future, and what the demands on the body will be. What do you have to do to prep to go into space and stay in space for a period of time?
So I think that there's a long answer to this, but let me just zone in on one. It's age.
Yeah.
I flew 4 times between age 38 and 48. And I would say the older you get, the easier it is to go up. Because it's easy for a body to adapt to zero gravity because there's no effort. You're floating. You're like just a blob floating around.
Right.
You don't even need shoes. We wear socks. You don't take shoes up. Coming back is very difficult on the body because now you're going back under this this pressure of gravity. When I was 38 years old, I didn't really have any problem with that. I got up, I walked around. The next day I was sore. My muscles were sore because they weren't really being used all that much.
Right. But
when I was 48 years old, I had a very hard time adapting when I came back. My blood pressure went very high.
Wow.
I remember I was dehydrated. I think I drank a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper when I came back, and I would never be able to drink that much. And I ate those little sandwiches. I ate like 4 of those. I was very, I want to say hungry. I had lost some weight. So taking that, I mean, that was probably some of the reason that I felt bad. But the other thing is my feet hurt. Walking on my feet, having not walked on my feet for 15 days, I came back. Now my feet hurt for almost a week. I was having trouble walking. And your spine extends when you go up there. And when I came back, the spine went back to normal, and that caused some pain. And I think overall energy, even at 48, I mean, I was a long distance runner and I kept myself in really good shape, but I was just incredibly exhausted coming back. And I'm still, that's only really one data point, that particular flight. So you can't draw a conclusion from that, but NASA flies more and more astronauts and keeps track of all of our medical, I want to say data. Like they'll take our blood pressure, they take blood, they do things like stand test where, you'll lay down for a couple of minutes and then they stand you up and you close your eyes and can you stand without falling over.
Wow. One
time I did fall over.
Wow.
I mean, and I wasn't, I was probably in my early 40s when that happened. So it's, I would say there's a program going on that is studying the human body by adding these extra variables.
Right.
Zero gravity. We don't experience that here on Earth, but what can we learn about the human body by taking away the gravity factor? And there's all kinds of research going on right now.
I'm sure.
It's very interesting.
It's really magical how we exist.
Magical is the best word to describe it.
I don't, with all of the details, microscopically in the human body, interacting with our environment. And this is a huge topic I spent a lot of time on, trying to understand how environment impacts our bodies in space. Space would be a great place to understand.
Well, back in the early days, before the Mercury program, the doctors thought that the astronauts would not survive. So they sent, the Russians sent up a dog and the Americans sent up a monkey.
Right.
And they came back. So I think they're like, well, maybe we can send a human. But the first American that went up was suborbital. His flight was only 15 minutes. That was Alan Shepard. And so we did this build-up approach. The Russians sent Yuri Gagarin up I think he did 3 orbits. That was he was the first
one,
the first man in space, the first Russian.
Right.
And we have found that the human body, it is amazing how we can adapt to different environments.
It is.
We might not like it.
Right.
But the body, and the other thing, on my second flight, the body remembers. Mm-hmm. When I went up on my second flight, I adapted
much
immediately, immediately. Mm-hmm. My first flight, it was very long process. I'm not sure I completely adapted until I wasn't, in my opinion, functional until the 4th day. I mean, fully functional until the 4th day, because I was like, I was losing things. And I tell people there's 3 reasons you lose things in space. First of all, they float away. Secondly, you forget where you put them, because on Earth you put everything on a table, right? But in space, or on the floor, and in space you can put it on the wall, at the ceiling. You Velcro all different places, and so I was forgetting, where did I Velcro that? And then the third one is your crew members take your stuff. So there were 6 or 7 of us in this little cabin in the Space Shuttle, and they take my spoon, they take my wrench and my screwdriver, and like, where's all my tools? And so I was losing things, and until I figured out how to organize myself, and here on Earth, you lose something, you waste a lot of time looking for it. Mm-hmm. So I learned on my second flight, organize yourself. That was good. And the body, we were talking about earlier, the body just knew. My body remembered.
Like a bicycle, I guess.
And I went right to work. As soon as I got up there, I was right back to work.
Amazing. That is on
the second flight, and the third and the fourth, I did fine.
Yeah.
And I think all these years later, I think if I went up now, I think I'd be okay.
Yeah.
I would worry about coming back.
Right.
In readapting. But the good thing is when you come back, there's a lot of help.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can help you. I mean, you go in the hospital if you need to.
Exactly.
There's no hospitals in space.
I would do it in a heartbeat. So, that first 18 minutes is almost gone. I'm going to have to take a short break. I did want to say something about Magna Pharmaceuticals, though. Dr. Lesser, who is out in Virginia, takes good care of all of my patients with his Denovo. And you guys have heard his podcast, so go back and listen to that and many of my podcasts over the last 2 years. And so go to drpbetterlife.com. I'm going to have plenty of information about Col Collins and her book. So please visit drpbetterlife.com. We're going to take a short break. Be right back.
Depression, anxiety, low energy, weakness, these are just some symptoms of low B12 levels. And the absorbable B12 folate supplement that's helping people declare victory over depression symptoms is Denovo Plus B12 by Magna Pharmaceuticals. Patients with symptoms of depression often exhibit low levels of folate and vitamin B12. The human body needs sufficient folate intake to produce the essential neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These neurotransmitters alleviate feelings of sadness, anxiety, and gloom. What makes Denovo Plus B12 so successful? Denovo Plus B12 contains readily absorbable folate and B12. That means it's more successful at correcting the root cause of your deficiency, not just the symptoms. Whether you are suffering with low energy, depression, fatigue, or anxiety, you owe it to yourself to learn more at magnaweb.com. That's magnaweb.com. Please let us know at checkout that you heard about Denovo Plus B12 on The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Marianne Pinkston here with Col Eileen Collins, the first woman to command the Space Shuttle, and such a kind, and you're such a gentle person. I imagine somebody, really stark and strong, and I'm sure you are strong, no doubt about that. I know you wrote a great book with a lot of great stories, and I want to highlight that for the last few minutes of the show. Tell us how you got this written and kind of what this represents for you.
Well, the only reason that book got written was the pandemic, because I am normally so busy, I'd never have time to write a book.
Sure.
I wrote that book. I have a co-author, Jonathan Ward, who, cleaned it up for me, and he did a lot of research, helped me out, and he did some of the writing also. But when the pandemic hit, I was doing all my meetings on Zoom, couldn't really go anywhere, and I said, I'm really bored. And so my co-author contacted me and said, let's do the book. This is the time. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. So It took a year to write it. I used my logbooks. Most of it was from my memory, but we also did research on it. But it's it's mostly stories of flying. It's my childhood, why I decided to become a pilot, join the military, become an astronaut, and then the strange things that happened to me throughout my career. There's chapters on flying as an instructor pilot, flying the C-141. There's one chapter in each one of my missions. A chapter on the Columbia accident, which happened right before my last mission, then my last space flight, which we call the return to flight mission. And I try to weave in the leadership stories as I went through. So the book will appeal to those looking for ideas on how to be a better leader and a team player, as well as people that just want to hear stories. And I think it's a good book for young people. If young people are a good reader, jump into it, and maybe you'll decide you want to go into a STEM career, you maybe join the military, maybe you want to be an astronaut yourself.
Absolutely. And so, you have got, you had Judy Collins, you had Tom Hanks, Buzz Aldrin, you have a lot of great people who have said a lot of great things, and I just love you in the suit. You look so wonderful.
That's an Annie Leibovitz photo, by the way. She's a famous photographer that NASA commissioned her to take the photo. And when they first told me, I said, no, I have to decline that. I'm too busy. And NASA said, no, you have to take the photo. So I'm glad I did it. I didn't know what I was so into my job back then that everything was work. But I'm glad I did the photo because Annie Leibovitz was kind enough to let us use it as the cover of the book.
That's great. And so we're glad you did too, because now you are a huge staple in history. What does that feel like? You're a huge staple in history. You go into the history book.
So I'm a mom to my kids. I'm just like a normal person. I get up every day. I've got, typical problems that you face. Everybody's got problems. And, you just try to get through the day. And one of the good things about having been in the military is I learned all these little techniques to help me with tough times in my life. Sure. For example, flying airplanes, you learn aviate, navigate, communicate. The first thing you do is you maintain aircraft control, you analyze the situation, then you take proper action, then you land as soon as conditions permit. And I could go on and on. All these little things I've memorized, boldface in airplanes. Take care of the safety thing first. Take care of the immediate emergency. Don't live in the future. I've kind of become very procedural because of my time in the military. Sure. And I think that helps me with stress, because as we know, stress does really bad things to our body. And, I know I watched my parents. They had a very stressful life. My dad was a big drinker. My mother was a smoker. They separated, and they had very difficult life. And I watched what they did right and what they did wrong. Right. And I tried to learn from that. Right. But I think without going into a lot of detail there, I think what I learned in the military really helped me in my everyday life.
Absolutely. Very young going in. How young were you going into?
Well, I joined ROTC when I was 19. I went through basic training at age 19, which was not very much fun, but I look back and as I look back, I like it looking back. But when I was doing it, I didn't like it. But now I'm really proud I went through that. And then I was ROTC, and then I actually went to pilot training at age 21. Wow. I was 21 years old soloing jet aircraft. And the amount of responsibility they gave us was incredible. Right.
And I have a very good friend who is a retired colonel in the Army and lives at the Army retirement community. And you can hear those planes, those little Cessnas, every morning. They are gutting it. I tell you, they are going. And it's just absolutely amazing. This is such an honor to have you here. And I really would love for people to get this book and read your stories. And again, you're going down in history, and that's a wonderful thing. And we're so glad that you did. Do you think a quick question, got just a minute or two. Do you think we'll ever make it to Mars?
Yes, I believe humans will get to Mars. I'm not sure if that will happen in my lifetime. The United States, has a plan. It's called the Artemis program to go back to the moon. Right now, they're looking at late 2026. It's probably going to be later than that, but to land Americans on the moon. And we'll also have the first woman that will land on the moon.
Wonderful.
And I can't imagine what that would be like. Her life will be just like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. I can't imagine what that's going to be like when they come back. But we're going to land back on the moon, test the equipment on the moon that we will need to use on Mars. It's got to be tested on the moon's only 3 days away.
Exactly.
Mars is at least 6 months.
Right.
So I'm thinking Mars, it'll be in the late 2030s sometime.
Gotcha.
But it'll happen. Yeah. And I hope it's the United States. It could be another country, but the United States needs to stay focused on this because there's so much, I don't have time to get into it, but there's so much we can learn economically, scientifically, by traveling in space.
Mind-blowing, actually. So wonderful. And I would love to hear it all. Maybe we'll have you back if you'll come back and talk a little bit more, because I think it's a great, great topic. But everybody, thank you. I really am so glad that you came on, and I appreciate you very much. For your future, I know you've got a documentary coming up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right, so producer Keith Haviland he liked my book, so he decided to make a documentary.
Great story.
They've raised the money. It's all in work right now. It should come out at the end of this year. Keith Haviland, he's done many, but I would say the most similar is Gene Cernan, The Last Man on the Moon. He did a documentary on Apollo 17 Commander Gene Cernan. So I think it will be something similar to that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Are you going to be in it? Do you get to?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Oh,
good.
yes.
Sometimes I just show
working
pictures. They
very
don't
hard
put you in it, but I'm glad. Good. I'm glad they're going to put you in it.
It's a lot of work. We're digging out pictures and videos, and we're doing lots of interviews with people at NASA, people from my childhood, and I think it really will reflect the book, what it's like to be an astronaut, what it's like to become an astronaut.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it's very inspirational. That's my hope, that the documentary will inspire people of all ages.
It will, and you do, and you have, and thank you. You've inspired me beautifully, so thank you very much for coming on. So if everybody will go to drpbetterlife.com, I'm going to have links and information on Col Collins and her book, and then hopefully we can highlight her documentary late this year. And please also, as a favor to me, go check out Magna Pharmaceuticals at magnaweb.com. Everybody, have a great week, and thank you again.